Some of the information we're going to talk about today is dealing off of an interview that was given by Professor Shelby Steele, an English professor, and he tends to be brought from the quote-unquote Hoover Institute, and he has a very conservative point of view about issues pertaining to the black community. He has written a book called A Bound Man, and it basically talks about the reasons why Barack Obama cannot win if he's the presidency. And me and Lorie have shared some information back and forth. She had the opportunity to see the January interview. And Ms. Jones, what did you think about Shelby Steele's interview with Bill Moyers?
Well, I think first of all, we as African American people have to be very careful about generalizing, especially when our experiences are so different. You know, I think it's hard for a middle class person to talk about somebody who came from a poor upbringing, or similarly somebody who comes from a mixed race upbringing talk about somebody who's come from a completely African American upbringing. Now, I know he talked about the difference between his upbringing, having a mother and a father, even though he comes from an interracial family, and Obama having his mother raise him. And that's fine, you know, because I'm sure they have some dynamics that other people can't understand. But on the same token, I think it's important for him to recognize that his generalized view about why black people will or won't vote for Obama is from his perspective, specifically as he talked about the issues between the types of black people being bargainers, meaning people who assume that the system automatically is not racist, and so they're able to succeed. And then the people who are challengers, who are the people who basically have a chip on their shoulder until the system shows them that they aren't racist.
Well, I think the thing, and I found the interview fascinating. I mean, some people found it to be infuriating, but I found it fascinating because it's interesting to me, because we always want to get a well-rounded view of what people think. And since black people are not monolithic, he's speaking from a perception that is something that's very unusual to the black community. Now, even though I don't necessarily agree with all of his points, I think it's interesting to listen to them, and especially since a lot of those people are the ones that are in the government right now, that are serving under President Bush and in his cabinet positions or whatever. So he made a comment, and I'm gonna he said the politic of white obligation to black people. He said those people that are quote unquote challengers have that philosophy that white people owe them something, and until they get it, they're not going to stop complaining. You know, and the power of black people is the chip on our shoulder. You know,
and in my opinion, it's not necessarily that you think white people owe you something. It's just recognizing that the system was set up in a certain way that hasn't actually changed enough so that it can balance the playing field. You know, similarly, when he talked about the bargainers and mentioned people like Oprah Winfrey and Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier, people who have succeeded in life, he seemed to be saying that those are the people who have a clear mind and don't think that racism exists, and it's until they're actually confronted with racism that they actually start looking at it from that perspective. But I don't believe that's true. I think it's possible to be a person of African descent, to be successful in society, to recognize that there are things in society that racially oppress certain individuals, and not have a chip on your shoulder. It's called recognition, you know, recognition of reality.
Well, I think the way he put it in terms of the philosophy of being a bargainer was that I'm not going to hold your whiteness against you if you don't hold my blackness against me. I'm not going to assume that you're racist if you don't hold me being black against me.
And how can you do that? I mean, you have no idea what's going on in the mind of somebody when they hire you, or, you know, give you an opportunity of some kind. You have no idea what they're holding and what they're not holding against you. I don't think you should sit up there and concentrate specifically on negativity, because it will hold you back. It's a negative emotion that will wind up coloring your viewpoint on the entire situation. But I do think it's easy to recognize that, I mean, and we have perfect examples in history. We have school systems in black communities that don't have books, don't have textbooks. They don't fix up the schools themselves. They don't fix up the streets in certain neighborhoods. They have things that show you that if it's happening in certain environments, you know, and not in other environments. Even Regent Adelaide Sanford did a study about the amount of money that's spent per child in the suburbs versus within the inner city. And so if you have concrete proof that there is some sort of inequity, voicing it doesn't mean that you're a challenger.
Now, playing the devil's advocate, Shelby Steele would say to you that your black identity is grounded in grievance. So all of the things you talk about are grievances and stuff, and it's 40 years later, you know. America is not the same country that it was before. So I mean, why do you know? And I listen to a lot of people on YouTube as they respond. You know, I don't want to be held responsible for what somebody else did. I didn't do that.
Well, for me personally, and I think for a lot of other people of African descent, my black identity is grounded in my cultural identity. I mean, my pride in being a person of African descent. You know, the cultural differences, the traditions, the practices. I mean, we have a lot of running jokes within our community about the way our parents raised us, and, you know, the importance of getting, you know, you had to get home before the street lights went on, and the discipline, you know, certain things that are a part of our cultural identity that make us proud of who we are. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're downgrading any other group, but we have a pride in who we are. And I know he did mention also something about black power equals something equivalent to grievances, and that I don't agree with, because
the black identity is grounded in grievance.
Yeah, but the whole idea behind black power, as was mentioned during the civil rights era with people like Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, is that we're not necessarily always antagonistic towards another group just because we have a sense of pride in who we are. And because we ask for opportunities that we think we're due, not just based on the fact that we built this, you know, this country on slavery, you know, and supported the Industrial Revolution and all that other stuff, just based on the fact that we're here and we're a human being, that we deserve equal opportunities, is enough of a reason.